Hello, and welcome to this new edition of the Tulo Centre podcast series, where we welcome Tulo Centre alumni to share some of their experiences and their knowledge with us. Really happy to have three of our alumni with us today, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves, and then we'll talk about their experiences in Tulo and some of the work that they do now in their careers. So, with that, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal Thiessen, and I'm the Lands and Taxation Officer with Tzeachten First Nation. I've been working with Tzeachten First Nation for the last 4.5 years, and I actually don't really have much to add right at this moment. I just all of a sudden got stumped and a little bit put on the spot, but yeah, I really enjoy what I do, and I'm excited to be able to contribute today and talk about how my my experiences with the Tulo Centre has helped me in my role.
Thanks, Crystal. Deanna?
Good morning or afternoon or whenever you're listening to this. Deanna Honeyman, I am the Lands and Property Taxation Manager for Tzeachten First Nation. I have been working with Tzeachten. This is my 14th year. Started as the role of property tax officer and worked my way into manager, and then added the role of lands to that as well. And I'm a recent alumni, although I actually started the program 10 years ago. So it's taken me 10 years to finish the program, but yeah, I finished it. And really looking forward to this. This is my very first podcast. Although I've listened to podcasts, but this is my first time actually participating in one. So kind of interested to see how this is going to go, and looking forward to being able to share in this format.
Thank you, Deanna. Carlene?
Hi, my name is Carlene George. I work for the Penticton Indian Band as the tax administrator. I've worked for PIB since 2002, right after I graduated, so we're going on like 22 years. I've worked in property tax for since 2009, so about 12 years. I'm not doing the math in my head right now, but I love working for my band.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're just thrilled for you to all be joining us today, and I'm looking forward to just talking about some of your experiences. And I am really curious what led to you initially enrolling in the Tulo Centre program. Like, how did you hear about the Tulo Centre? And yeah, what led to you first deciding that you wanted to pursue a certificate program?
Are we going on the same order?
Go ahead.
No, Deanna, you go ahead.
Okay. So it was right after I actually started working in taxation that I had heard about the Tulo Centre, and it was very new, obviously, because it was going on 10 years ago, and back then it was in person. I think there was actually a online version, but it was very, very different than how the online is working these days. It was an alumni who actually introduced me when I was trying to just learn a little bit about taxation, because I had no training. I was basically just thrown into the role, and it was kind of a sink or swim kind of deal. And of course, I was going to swim and not sink, and so I was just trying to find every option there was for me. 10 years ago, I had pretty little kids. And so to have to travel to Kamloops for a week at a time was just not really, really a possibility to leave the young kids at home. And so there, like I said, there was an online version, didn't really work out that well. So I just kind of like put that on hold. And then it was like when the pandemic came and I heard that they were doing online again, I'm like, you know what? This is my opportunity. This is perfect opportunity. Let's complete the program so I can say that I've done it, even though I've been working in it in the field for 10 years or more than 10 years. And so with this new version of the online option, made it so much more interactive. Like before, literally, we were having just to read online. We're just reading the manual, if you will, and then doing some assignments. There was no interaction. There was no like teaching. There was no talking with people. And I know, Carlene, you can probably add to that a little bit, because we started off together doing the online version, and you were able to go in person, but I kind of just, like I said, put it on hold.
Carlene, did you want to add on?
Yep, sure. So when I first got the job, I started off as tax clerk in 2009, and I also knew nothing about First Nations property tax. And I was actually living in the US at the time, so I didn't even really know PIB was even doing property tax. So I was really excited when I got the job. And the previous tax administrator that was working at that time was already enrolled in the class. So she was one class ahead of me. And so I got enrolled and registered, and we were able to finish the course together, which was part of the first cohort. It was so exciting from start to finish. And I didn't have kids at the time, so it was easier for me to take that week off and go and leave town and be in Kamloops for that time. When I graduated, I was 28. So when I think 10 years today, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy. And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? So when this opportunity came, I said, yes, I will be a tax administrator. So it gave me that sense of purpose, and it was awesome.
That is so great to hear. Thanks, Carlene. What about you, Crystal?
I would probably add to what Deanna said, where when I first started in my role, I was a lands clerk as well as a taxation clerk, and she had mentioned to one of my coworkers that she'd like to see them take this course, and then we discussed it at that time. But I didn't know about Tulo. I didn't know what Tulo was prior to that. Um, and when she brought it up, it just wasn't a possibility, because I too have well, my kids were younger, like now they're 15 and 12, but at the time, like Tyler would have been 7 and Rachel would have been 10. And my husband's job isn't a typical 9 to 5 job. So I do a lot of things as though I'm like a single mom in a way, because he is away a lot for work, or he has um, odd hours or different hours than a lot of people. And it was basically almost forgotten about in a way, because it wasn't something that was even a possibility. And then Deanna came back to me and mentioned it again, that they're doing it online, and I said, yeah, I can definitely do that, because going away for a couple of days at a time, a few times a year is a lot easier than a week every month, especially with things like getting your kids to school, getting them up in the morning, getting them ready. Like I have a village of people I depend on, but I don't have family nearby that can help. So, for people that are in that situation where you have to get your kids somewhere, this was the perfect opportunity, because they would go to school, I would come back home. This doing this online, and the Zoom itself, like I do feel that it's probably changed a lot from when Carlene did it the first time and Deanna did it the first time online. But yeah, it was, I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't offered online. And when they actually asked us at the end of the course, there was a large number of people from across the country that also felt the same way, that, just doing the traveling and being away from home for that length of time, that many times in a row, is not necessarily a possibility. But it was really exciting to be able to go at the end for one of the sessions, to be able to meet all my classmates online. But I guess I'm like totally getting off topic of that question. But yeah, that's basically, Deanna just said, you know what, we're going to do it this time. And that's what we did. And I'm really happy I did.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you've all made some really great points. And we talked about how things have innovated since COVID, and that's one of the things that we've worked really hard at. So for those of people tuning in, listening later, the Tulo Center's program, we've done where students will typically have come every couple of months and spend a week in Kamloops. Just in an intensive week session for each of the certificate courses. and you do that 8 times and then you complete your certificate. But not everybody is able to travel to Kamloops for a week at a time, multiple times a year. And so now we're able to offer multiple methods of delivery. So we have, you can still attend in person, and you'll be here in Kamloops for a week at a time, or you can tune in on Zoom and pay attention that way. So really trying to meet the needs of everybody, recognizing that not just childcare, but you might be looking after parents or elders, and it's just not always feasible for you to leave no matter your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some of my next question was around some of the challenges you encountered in balancing work and school. And we talked a little bit about balancing family needs, but what, just in terms of how it was for you in, you're all working in your roles while doing school, and just wondered if you had any experiences that you wanted to share, how some of the challenges you encountered, and maybe how you had to overcome some of those in pursuit of your completing your program.
There were times when it was definitely overwhelming. Like when, we, at the last half, we had lost one of my coworkers went to a new role, and we were still working from home. So hiring somebody to be able to step into the role, or to fill their place was a little difficult. So there were times when it was overwhelming, and there was times where I'd have to wait for the family to go to bed because the distractions and the noise, and I'd be up till 1 a.m. doing assignments. But there were other times, like I'm very fortunate because Deanna is actually my manager, and she would say, okay, we need to get these assignments done, and we would actually stay in, or like when we were back in the office, we would work on assignments during lunchtime, or we would set aside a time to go over them together and things like that. But balancing work and school, I think, just with or without a family, is definitely a challenge. But when you're done, it sure feels good to know that you've accomplished it.
Yeah, I think Crystal, is right. It was a challenge. Definitely, there's sometimes that are more challenging than others, especially when there's classes, during the month of May and June, when that's the tax season, and we're dealing with making sure we get the tax notices out and collecting the taxes, and so it was busy time. And even though there was a pandemic going on for us, it didn't seem like it slowed anything down. So because we're both lands and taxation, we're dealing with lands, and there's a lot of building construction going on, and there's a lot of transactions that we're dealing with, because we're like the land title office, we're registering documents as well. So we're dealing with both lands and taxation in a very busy office, yet taking the time to do the Zoom calls, so you're away from that by doing Zoom calls, but you still have to get work done, but you also have to make time to get the assignments done because you have a deadline and you want to get those done in a deadline. So yeah, it's a prioritizing, and some late nights, some weekend work. So you're letting your family know, it's like, oh yeah, I can't do anything because I got to spend some time this weekend to get my assignments done or whatever. So it's just definitely trying to find how to prioritize, and we had so much going on when this past year, because
Yeah.
we're the latest, or the most recent graduating class. We had the pandemic, then we had wildfires that we were hearing all over BC that were happening, and then in November, literally the day before we were going to be driving to Kamloops, because we thought, oh, we're going to do one class in person finally, we had the floods, and all the highways were closed, and like major flooding and not only that fact that the roads were closed, but Tzeachten also had, we were dealing with some member houses that flooded. Like there was like 12 or 13 houses. So, it's like all these things, but yet I still say, you know what, we still got our assignments done and we still graduated on time. So, it can
Yeah.
be, but it can
Yeah.
be a little stressful for sure.
Yeah. But one of the things that I did find, like, to add to what Deanna said, was that the instructors were so good about that type of thing. And like, I even forgot, like, the day after I had a small house fire the day before I had to start one of the classes, and I had to miss class for 2 days. But I mean, well, it could have been a lot worse, but I had to deal with everything with that, and it was probably more of the overwhelming piece mentally about it. But and then I had to work from home, like balancing work and school and home life was. Then we had all the contractors coming in during the courses to rebuild the part of my house that had the fire. So I was trying to do that with construction noise, and like it was just kind of like there was always something happening in the background, but they were just so good about it, and the classmates were so good too.
Carlene, you've been with the Tulo Center for a long time. You were one of the early students to go through the program, and you're a board member now for the Tulo Center. When you think back to how our programming has evolved and how far we've come since the beginning, I just wondered if you would reflect on some of that and what you see through your time and sticking with the Tulo Center.
Yeah, I think the progress is amazing, and I've been lucky enough to see it as our tax clerk was part of the last cohort. So being able to witness the type of homework and assignments she was doing compared to what we were doing in 2011 and 10 and 9, it's just like, oh my gosh, the material. When she didn't use her headphones, I could kind of listen in, and just hearing the amount of new stuff was so awesome, and I was so happy for her. And she graduated with you guys actually in June, I think. Carmen's our tax clerk.
Oh yeah.
So I got to pop in the class every once in a while and do my little waves. So, but just seeing, even talking about the online courses back in the first cohort compared to now, it's like you can't even compare. It's complete apples and oranges. So I'm so grateful of the new technology, and I'm excited for the new students for the upcoming classes to be able to learn that type of information. And I'm like, can I take the course over again? But
Actually, yeah, I looked forward to it, Carlene. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. It was really well done.
yeah, so even with going back to the challenges, it felt like it was a long time to leave the office for a week. And before our tax clerk came on, I was the only one working in the tax department. And so I would have to put up the signs like taxation closed until next Monday. And I would be nervous sitting in class, like, oh my goodness, I wonder how many taxpayers showed up. And there was nobody there to help. And so we got the tax clerk in, which made it easier for each one of us to be able to leave the office for a week at a time. And I'm currently taking the lands management course with Tulo. And so that's completely online, and my whole household got COVID at the same time. I'm trying to log in and do the courses. And but I do have an awesome support team, my partner and my family. So this last two classes of the lands management class are in person. So I'm thankful enough to have my sister come move into my house for a week and take care of my kids. So it's exciting.
Thank you. And I know, Deanna, you took some courses like you were saying earlier, and then you've come back to do new courses. So just I'd love to hear more from your experience and how you see, your perspective on how things have changed over time.
Yeah, so I mean, like 10 years ago when they had some online options, like I said, it was literally you're reading the coursework online. There was no Zoom. There was no facilitator or instructor instructing the course. It was self-taught, right? You're reading the course material and then trying to come up with the answers or deal with the assignments. So it was definitely, I mean, it was self-paced. So I think you had like a month or something to do, there's a timeline to do it. But, and I think there was, a facilitator that you could contact via email and, ask if you were having some help or needed some help with anything. But there was no interaction. There was no presentations or, I think there might've been some little video clips that you could watch, but really it was self-taught. And so I just found, you know what, I'm not getting enough out of it, so I'm just not going to continue on. But now, 10 years later, let's look at it again, and you're doing it via Zoom, so you're seeing the instructor, you're seeing the other classmates, you're having interaction, whether it's going into breakout sessions and having your discussion there, or even if you're making comments in the chat where that can pose some more discussion because of that comment. You're having experienced people come and share, not just reading slides, not just, but they're actually using like real life experiences. And that, I don't know about anyone else, but I learn a lot more when someone is actually saying, well, this is how, or this is what I experienced, or this is how it works for me, or whatever, using that real life experience. And but have even just seeing someone's face when you're having that instruction, if you're and hearing their presentation, is so much better than just like having just to read and read and read and read. So it's definitely evolved, and now even more so, where you can have the option of being in person or do it via Zoom, so that if and even if you can't make that Zoom call, it's recorded, so you could listen at a later time, if you have a really important meeting that you just can't miss, or or whatever comes up with your work or life. You have that option that you can still be part of it. You hear you watch the presentations, or the discussions, and then you can still be able to go and answer and do your coursework, because you've actually seen it, right? So the new hybrid is just, I guess we can be thankful for the pandemic for that, because it probably didn't really exist prior to that. So there's one bonus for dealing with the pandemic, what we got out of it.
I agree, Deanna. And the fact that it was recorded was so useful when we were doing assignments, because there would be times where it's like, oh, what did Norm say? I'm going to go back to that section. And you could go back to those recordings, and you could find where that item was discussed, because sometimes, like, you're not taking notes. Like I wasn't, because sometimes you just didn't, like, you didn't need to take notes, but you could go back through the recordings and find what you needed, or when they were going over assignments, like if you missed something, you could go back to that section. Like, they actually made it so interesting and kept my attention so much that I actually would be afraid to leave to step away to use the washroom, because I was afraid I would miss something important or miss something really good. So that somebody's doing a good job on Zoom, which is already a challenge, when you don't want to step away from that Zoom meeting because you're afraid of missing something that's important. I mean, I've been on some Zooms where I've muted my camera and I'll listen to it in the background, but I'm not invested. I'm not paying attention, because firstly, they're probably reading the slides. If they're reading slides, I'm already lost. Like, I can read the slides myself. The instructors don't read the slides. They actually, like, they might read the slide really quickly, and then they'll talk, they'll expand so much, and they'll talk about example, like Deanna said, examples, real life experiences. They'll talk about other First Nations where things have happened that apply to whatever the discussion is about, and they just kept it really interesting. And the students that were on there, some of them also were able to share their experiences. And like the first Zoom, nobody said a word. Like, nobody talked. And by the end, everybody was talking and comfortable. And it was and it did take that. And the first session, they would put us in what was called breakout rooms. And I was like, what are they doing? They're making us go talk to each other. And at first it was awkward, right? Because you don't know these people. But by the end, it's like, oh, good, this person's in my room, and you're all excited. And so it's they just, like Deanna said about, and Carlene about, you did it this way, but they've I don't think I would have been able to even do it online, the old way, but the new way, the way that they've done it was really, really good.
I think one of
And
the
I
things
think if you can make taxation interesting that you don't want to leave to go to the bathroom, that's saying something. I mean, when
Exactly.
I've told people, oh yeah, I'm taking this course, and they're like, oh, like what are you doing, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that they, were able to make basically a whole year's course about taxation interesting, then they're doing something right.
I think because
Yeah.
the students are feeding off of the passion that the teachers have, and the teachers believe in us and they know that we can do good. So we can literally feed off of that energy, and it's positivity and it's excitement and it's passion. And I think that's hard to find when it comes to property tax, but we're here.
Exactly. I agree. And I mean, they would do little things like they created little games that were like trivia games, but it got competitive with everyone. Or Andre, he would always have these little jokes or these little side jokes, and Norm would always I always would be curious what Norm was going to have. Is he always changed his backdrop, but it was like really like things like The Simpsons or SpongeBob. Like he always, it was like, it was just, they tried to, they just tried to keep us engaged. And they actually, I really feel that they succeeded. Um, because like Deanna said, how do you make taxation interesting? Like, yeah, when people go, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, and you're so excited and they're looking at you like, no, it's tax. Right. But yeah, no, they did a great job.
That's really great to hear. We care a lot about student success here at the Tulo Center. When students succeed, that means that our communities are succeeding, and that's really what we're all here for, is to watch our communities move forward. Listening to some of your stories just made me think about the capacity that we've had at the Tulo Center, where it started compared to now. We've had a lot of growth, and we're able to, we've got program coordinators for each of our 3 certificate programs. We have student support in Norm and instruction and Andre and all the whole team that we're able to put together to be able to deliver some of these, to deliver our program offerings. But I heard you all talk a little bit about how the capacity in your communities have grown. When you first started, you were the only tax administrator, Carlene. And when you went away to school, you had to basically say your office was closed. So just thinking about, how your capacity has grown in your departments, and just hearing about those is just so interesting. And so I just wondered if any of you had any thoughts about that, about how you started as maybe a one-person office, and now how you've been able to expand, and how you've had more Tulo students come through that are working in your offices too.
Well, again, with like same as Carlene, with me, it was just me, and now I have expanded. Now, granted, it is 2 departments with lands and taxation. So the 2 staff I have Crystal, and then I have one other staff, but they're both familiar with both jobs. So and like when Crystal and I were both away doing classes, my other staff, Hayden, was able to carry on. He was able to answer questions. So he hasn't taken the program yet, but just has had some on the job training and that kind of thing. But at least if we're away, we have someone else who is able to answer. We've also slowly started integrating our finance department to have some knowledge with the tax. We use the TAS program, so they have some familiarness with that, and they also are starting to. So we're trying really through Tzeachten as a whole, doing some real cross training, so that so maybe, that might entice some people to go for further training. But for right now, at least, we don't have where we have to shut down because, there is no staff there and no one else knows. So that's really something that's important to Tzeachten, is to have a cross, real diversity through the departments, and have that cross training.
Yeah, one of the finance staff had actually asked me about the course, and I said, if you can do it online, I said, it's great. Like, they were hesitant, and I think I may have sold it, but then I actually really enjoyed it. Like I said, I looked forward to the classes. It was challenging enough, but the actual content of the class, I did not feel that I was lost. And one of the things that I can say about the instructors is that when you didn't understand something or when you were struggling, they really encourage you to reach out. And when you like, people felt safe enough to say, I don't understand this. And Norm was extremely patient with us, like when we were struggling or when we had a question. Like he'd be like, oh yeah. And like he just made it so easy, and he made us feel comfortable. And we didn't feel like it was a bad thing to ask for help. Like they actually made you they encouraged it, and they encouraged us all to work together. So, through the course, I've met some people that, like we're still in touch. And the other thing is that, we were able to work together. We would email each other, say, hey, I'm stuck on this question. And we'd have our own little separate group Zoom type things as it progressed. Like we actually were able to connect with each other. But the instructors definitely create a safe space. So when people would ask questions, they never made anybody feel that their question wasn't valid, or that, or made them feel that because they didn't know that there was any type of an issue.
That's so great. Carlene, so with same kind of question, when you're so you started out, you were just doing it on your own, doing tax administration for Penticton by yourself, and now you've got Carmen in your office who's also gone through the Tulo Centre. So how does that help, having that extra capacity and having somebody that's gone through the Tulo program too, that's able to now support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, when it was just myself, I never took vacation time. It was building up, and I didn't want to leave the office by itself. And then I went through two maternity leaves during that time. And luckily, I was able to get Nicole to work at PIB during my maternity, because I felt confident with her there. She was part of the class with us. So shout outs to Nicole. But I went through two maternities. I have two kids, 8 and 7. So just taking them along this journey, and having Carmen as our tax clerk now gives me the confidence to be able to leave the tax office and have her there, and being able to handle everything. And it also gives her the confidence to be able to leave, and I'm there handling everything. So we make an amazing team. And I always give the advice, if someone's starting up property tax, that you need at least two employees there, so that it gives the person time to go take training and take turns taking training. So I think just a one-man person just isn't enough for property tax. But it all worked out, and we're exciting, and yeah.
That's and I've heard some of you, so I've heard throughout the conversation just the talk about the community and being able to connect with other people that do the same work. And it's just so great to hear that people are staying in touch long after that they do the program. And we're doing a lot. We're working hard on making sure that we create places for the community to stay networked. So we've launched the Slack channel this year, and this podcast is another thing that we're doing just to help each other learn from each other's experiences and share new ideas as you continue to go forward in these careers. And so I just wanted to ask a question around how completing the program at the Tulo Centre has supported your career development, and reflecting on where you kind of started as a single person, and now Carlene and Deanna, you've got a team of people. So what do you think, what do you have to say around your career growth as a result of doing Tulo Centre programs?
Well, I think, for personally, not only just for the community, obviously, now the community can say, oh yeah, we have, a certified tax administrator, 2 certified tax administrators at this point. But for me personally, I've also have been invited to be an instructor at Tulo. So using my experience, even before I had graduated, I've been invited to be an instructor to share my experience. So there's that. And, just, and I'm helping out some other communities with their tax, their tax program. They're just starting out. So I'm able to, be able to use my experience that I've gained over the last 14 years to help other communities as well. So I'm not just staying with Tzeachten, but I'm helping others. So just with, having that knowledge, right? So, and I just want to do a quick shout out too before we get too far. But as another option for an alumni or tax administrators in general is the First Nation Tax Administrators Association, because that's another great networking opportunity. It's been a little tough over COVID, but hopefully now that we're back to being able to have meetings in person and having conferences and stuff, we'll be able to get that back up and running. But that's another opportunity for the networking.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're actually looking at doing a future episode with some people that are on the FNTAA board. So the tax administrator certificate is our longest running certificate. So we've got quite a few tax administrator graduates, and we also have graduates from our lands management program and our applied economics program. So as we continue with this alumni series, we're looking at different topics and bringing in different people to speak about all of the resources that are available to you once you graduate and while you're going into school. So we'll be looking forward to that conversation as well. Carlene, what about you in terms of your career development as a result of completing the certificate?
I think for me, it gave me a huge sense of purpose for my community because it's such an important department. It gives me the confidence to do my job on a day-to-day basis. I'm excited to take more classes just to enhance the knowledge and skills that I have right now. And it makes me a role model for my kids and for the community members. And I've taken part in some like education conferences, and I advertise Tulo, advertise FNTC to say this is a real course, this is a real profession. And then obtaining the CFNTA through the FNTAA, visit their website, by the way. It, it just gives us those short-term, long-term goals that we can look forward to. And it's just, we were taught in the class to help our fellow tax administrators if there's any questions or if we need any help to be able to reach out. And I think being able to reach out and also be able to help others that reach out to us is just such a bonus and a benefit for this type of work because it is so unique. And I think just within the Okanagan Nation, being able to support each other that way and outside of the Okanagan Nation, it's just been a blessing. And I'm honored, really, I'm honored to be a part of this profession. I always bug my kids, are you going to be tax administrators when you grow up? And it's so cute when they ask me, Mom, what do you do at work? And I'm like, oh, listen and visit me at work. And it's just so awesome. It really helps when you love your job and you enjoy going to work every single day. And I do. And I've been saying that since 2009 when I got this job. So it's awesome.
That is so great to hear. What about you, Crystal?
Actually it's actually, I think it's been more useful than I actually realize. Like in hindsight, I think about all the things that, now I know about that I didn't know before I went. But most recently, how I benefited was Deanna gave me a project to update one of our property transfer tax law, which I would have had no idea how to do. Although it's not property tax, it's property transfer tax. It's basically the same premise, but how to, update and change a law to be able to prepare it to go. And I know that had I not taken this course, that I never would have been able to do something like that. Like I may have been able to do something like that, but it would have been a struggle. And just the resources, like actually knowing what the role of FNTC is, right? I didn't know. I didn't know exactly what it did or how it applied to what I was doing. And I actually didn't even really know what a taxation taxation administrator did about, preparing the laws and all of the behind the scenes, I guess you could call it, of the role. So it gave me a greater appreciation for what Deanna did. And it also does help me daily as far as even, it's just, I honestly can say I don't even really know how much it helps me, but I know it does because, there's so much that we do that we don't realize in our day-to-day roles, how much we've learned. Like I have connections at FNTC. I reach out to them. I've sent them emails, but I never would have been able to do that before. But on a day-to-day basis, I never would have realized that even it was the taxation program that helped me. But it has greatly.
You used to know this is my job, and then that was it.
Yes.
But you didn't know the
Yeah.
bigger picture until you
Yeah.
took the course. So then you see that there's more to it than just the day-to-day, the little tasks, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
bigger picture. So now that you have that understanding, it helps with your job, because now how it affects everything else, and not just
Mhm.
the little things.
Exactly. And one of the other things that it's helped with is even knowing what other First Nations are doing, because it seems like even Carlene, like there is a little, every place is a little bit different. It just feels like, and everybody has things that are working for them, and you're sharing and you're learning, and it's like, oh, they do it this way, well, maybe we can do it this way too. So the networking that comes with it, and the daily networking, even like Delilah Daniels, right? I reached out to her a couple weeks ago about something. I wouldn't have even known who Delilah was prior to this. So there's all of those little things that you don't even realize how the course has positively impacted my day-to-day duties in my role.
So that's really great to hear all of the ways that you benefit. And I just wonder, as we wrap up here, what are some of the ways that you see your First Nation and ultimately your community benefiting from having trained people working in these roles? So so tax administrators that have gone through the tax administration program, or lands managers that have gone through the lands management program. Like, just wondering if you see those benefits, and what they are from your perspective.
I think that we are the bridge between the taxpayers and chief and council administration and staff to the taxpayers. We are the frontline workers, and we need to be able to communicate and have transparency, which we were taught in class, and be able to manage the connections between all of the stakeholders. I think lately the question has been, how can we implement more of the culture and language to our current laws? And I think through the expenditure standards with the line items, we can utilize like culture and recreation, and how can we add more of that so that we're educating our members and educating our taxpayers. I think also the FNG, I always advertise that so that our band members and our taxpayers can look at the past, the present, and know what's going to be coming in the future. They can see that development and growth, so that they can see the benefits to them and benefits the stakeholders. I think just the administration knowing that we have someone managing the property tax department is just a relief, and knowing that we're educated and we continue to become educated through the Tulo and TRU and FNTC. They've been amazing. And it's just, yes.
I think to kind of add to what Carlene was saying too is, especially when we're doing our budgets and stuff, having the knowledge of how the money can be utilized, because sometimes, chief and council or the band general manager or band manager may not totally understand that. So the fact that we have that that knowledge of really for the laws, what can and can't be used, I think, just if we didn't have a tax administrator who had that knowledge or who had taken those programs, they could be doing something that's not allowed, and then that could affect things later, right? So it's just having that knowledge, and having the not only having the knowledge, but having the understanding why. Like, so part of the training, you're going to know why you have to do it this way, rather than this is the way you have to do it, right? So you need to have that sort of understanding, and that's just going to help, with budgeting, or with, long-term planning. And I think by having the training behind you, or with that you've received the training, just helps with just the overall administration.
So, I guess my last question would be, if we do have listeners that are maybe thinking about, like Deanna, where they maybe have taken courses before and are thinking about coming back, or maybe thinking about taking another certificate program, what would you say to them if they were on the fence about whether or not they should register?
I would say do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little intimidating at first, but sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Deanna, you go ahead.
Well, I think just the fact of, anytime you're taking courses, it's always intimidating, and that you have a family life and you have work life, and then to take something else on. But, in the end, I think you'll definitely find that it's worth it. It's worth the, however long it's going to take you, a year or whatever, but it's worth it to have that. And, knowledge is everything, right? What is the saying? Knowledge is power, right? So definitely, take it. It's not as intimidating as you think. And like Crystal even said, the instructors are very accommodating. If something comes up and you have to, take a little extra time to get your, your assignments in, it's okay. So go ahead, and it's worth it.
I agree.
I think just simply seeing the smiles on our faces and everything that we're saying is consistent to the knowledge and education that they're delivering. And so just being able to see the confidence that we're gaining, I would hope that anybody could gain the same confidence through these courses alone. And that they really do take care of us. Tulo, FNTC, they do take care of us, and we're not alone. And I think just that alone is comforting.
Yeah. And if you're considering doing it where you're going to be on campus, the TRU campus is beautiful. So there is that added bonus.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. But if you do it from home, you can do it in your jammies.